The air in the sewer was thick with the stench of decay and stagnant water. Lieutenant Kralvek of the Zorathian Empire moved cautiously through the dimly lit tunnel, his four-clawed feet gripping the slimy surface with practiced ease. His chitinous armor, a deep iridescent blue, gleamed faintly under the flickering light of his wrist-mounted illuminator. Kralvek was a warrior of noble birth, a veteran of 100 battles across the galaxy, and yet here he was, crawling through the bowels of a human city on a backwater planet called Earth. His mission was clear: retrieve the stolen Zorathian artifact from the human thieves who had dared to desecrate his people's sacred relics. The humans, he had been told, were a primitive species, barely capable of spaceflight, and no match for a warrior of his caliber. But as he navigated the labyrinthine tunnels, Kralvek couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The humans were unpredictable, and their cities were strange. Behind him, Corporal Jake Thompson of the Earth Defense Force struggled to keep up. Jake was a wiry man in his late 20s, with a mop of unruly brown hair and a perpetual grin that seemed to irritate Kralvek to no end. He had been assigned as the alien's guide, a role he had accepted with his usual mix of enthusiasm and sarcasm. "So, big guy," Jake said, his voice echoing off the tunnel walls. "You sure this is the right way? 'Cause I'm pretty sure we passed that same pile of garbage about 10 minutes ago." Kralvek paused, his antennae twitching in irritation. "Silence, human. Your incessant chatter is distracting. I am tracking the energy signature of the artifact. It is close." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Tracking, huh? With those fancy antennae of yours? You know, back home, we just use GPS. It's a lot less slimy." Kralvek turned to glare at the human, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the dim light. "Your primitive technology is of no use here. The artifact emits a unique quantum resonance that only a Zorathian can detect." Jake held up his hands in mock surrender. "Hey, no offense, big guy. Just saying, if you ever want to upgrade to something a little more 21st century, let me know. I know a guy." Kralvek growled low in his throat, a sound that made Jake's grin widen. The alien warrior turned and continued down the tunnel, his tail flicking in annoyance. Jake followed, doing his best to stifle a laugh. As they moved deeper into the sewer, the tunnels grew narrower and more convoluted. The walls were slick with moisture, and the air was thick with the smell of rotting organic matter. Jake wrinkled his nose in disgust, but Kralvek seemed unfazed. The Zorathian senses were adapted to far harsher environments than this. After what felt like hours, Kralvek suddenly stopped, his antennae twitching furiously. "We are close," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The artifact is just ahead." Jake peered over the alien's shoulder, squinting into the darkness. "I don't see anything. You sure your antennae aren't just picking up a rat or something?" Kralvek ignored him and moved forward, his movements slow and deliberate. Jake followed, his hand resting on the grip of his sidearm. Despite his joking demeanor, he knew better than to underestimate the situation. The artifact they were after was powerful, and the humans who had stolen it were dangerous. They rounded a corner and found themselves in a large, circular chamber. The walls were lined with pipes and conduits, and the floor was covered in a thick layer of sludge. In the center of the room stood a makeshift altar on which rested the artifact, a small, crystalline orb that pulsed with a faint, otherworldly light. Kralvek's eyes narrowed. "There it is," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The heart of Zorath." Jake whistled softly. "That's it, huh? Doesn't look like much." "Do not be fooled by its appearance," Kralvek said. "The heart is a relic of immense power. In the wrong hands, it could be catastrophic." Jake nodded, his expression serious for once. "All right, big guy, let's grab it and get out of here." Kralvek moved toward the altar, his movements slow and deliberate. As he reached out to take the artifact, a sudden noise echoed through the chamber. The sound of footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from the shadows. Jake tensed, his hand tightening on his sidearm. "We've got company." From the darkness emerged a group of humans, their faces obscured by masks and their bodies clad in heavy armor. They carried an assortment of weapons, from crude blades to advanced energy rifles. At their head was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a scar running down the side of his face. Well, the man said, his voice dripping with malice. "Looks like we got ourselves some uninvited guests." Kralvek straightened, his hand resting on the hilt of his plasma blade. "You will return the heart of Zorath," he said, his voice cold and commanding, "or you will face the consequences." The man laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're in no position to make demands, Bug. This is our turf. And that artifact? It's ours now." Jake stepped forward, his sidearm drawn. "Listen, pal, you might want to rethink that. You're dealing with a Zorathian warrior here. Trust me, you don't want to mess with him." The man's eyes flicked to Jake, and a cruel smile spread across his face. "And who are you supposed to be? His pet human?" Jake's grin returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Something like that. Now, how about you hand over the artifact, and we all walk away without any trouble?" The man's smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure hatred. "Not a chance." With a roar, the man charged, his followers close behind. Kralvek moved with lightning speed, his plasma blade igniting with a brilliant blue light. The first attacker fell before he could even raise his weapon, the blade slicing through his armor like butter. Jake opened fire, his shots precise and deadly, taking down 2 more attackers in quick succession. The battle was fierce and chaotic, the narrow confines of the chamber making it difficult to maneuver. Kralvek was a whirlwind of destruction, his blade cutting through the enemy with ease. Jake fought with a mix of skill and desperation, his sidearm barking as he took down one attacker after another. Despite their efforts, the attackers kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. Kralvek and Jake were forced to fight back-to-back, their movements synchronized as they fended off wave after wave of enemies. As the battle raged on, Jake couldn't help but notice the absurdity of the situation. Here he was, a human soldier, fighting alongside a giant alien bug in a sewer, against a group of heavily armed thugs. It was like something out of a bad sci-fi movie. "You know," Jake said between shots, "this is not how I expected my day to go." Kralvek grunted, his blade slicing through another attacker. "Focus, human. We must retrieve the artifact." Jake nodded, his grin returning. "Right. Artifact. Got it." With a final, desperate push, they managed to break through the enemy lines and reach the altar. Kralvek grabbed the heart of Zorath, his antennae twitching with relief. "We have it," he said. "Now we must leave." Jake nodded, his expression serious. "Agreed. Let's get out of here before more of them show up." They turned and ran, the sounds of battle fading behind them as they made their way back through the tunnels. The